You're listening to Underground USA News.
Sunday, September 14, 2025. The United States is ramping up efforts to develop the Golden Dome, a sophisticated missile defense system aimed at protecting the nation from China's expanding arsenal of anti-satellite weapons and advanced missiles. General Stephen Whiting, head of U.S. Space Command, has emphasized the urgency of the project, citing China's decades-long development of orbital weapons, jamming systems and kinetic anti-satellite missiles designed to disrupt American military operations. The $175 billion initiative, backed by President Trump, involves collaboration with companies like SpaceX, Palantir, and Anduril to deploy hundreds of satellites for missile detection and interception. Though China has raised concerns, labeling the system as offensive and a violation of the Outer Space Treaty, critics argue the project's high costs and technical complexities could strain resources. But supporters see it as a necessary step to maintain strategic superiority amid rising global tensions. President Trump has announced the deployment of the National Guard to Memphis, Tennessee, citing the city's high crime rates and describing it as deeply troubled. The move, supported by Tennessee's Republican Governor Bill Lee, aims to replicate the federal law enforcement surge seen in Washington, D.C., but has drawn criticism from local Democrat leaders like Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris, who called it an overreach and threatened legal action, with many noting that since the governor is on board, there is no legal question. While Memphis Mayor Paul Young expressed reservations, noting a 44% drop in reported crime incidents in 2025 compared to 2024, the administration insists the intervention is necessary to address persistent violent crime, which remains among the highest in the nation per FBI data. Critics argue this risks militarizing domestic policing, while supporters see it as a necessary step to restore order in a city plagued by violence. The tragic stabbing of 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska on a Charlotte light rail train by DeCarlos Brown Jr. has reignited concerns about public safety and recidivism, with court records revealing a troubling pattern of criminal behavior within Brown's family. Brown, a homeless felon with an alleged history of mental illness, faces federal and state charges for the unprovoked August 2025 attack, which claimed the life of Zarutska, a talented artist who fled war-torn Ukraine. His brother, Stacey DeJohn Brown, is serving a 27 to 36-year sentence for a 2012 murder, while his sister, Tracy Von Trier Brown, has a record including shoplifting, larceny, and felony conspiracy, with arrests as recent as 2024. Their father, DeCarlos Brown Sr., has faced charges for breaking and entering and weapon possession. This generational cycle of crime has fueled calls for stricter sentencing and enhanced transit security to protect communities from repeat offenders. The United States is ramping up efforts to secure its supply of rare earth elements and lithium, essential for advanced technology and renewable energy, as a strategic counter to China's dominance in these markets. Recent initiatives, including significant investments by the Trump administration, aim to expand domestic mining and processing capabilities, with projects like MP Materials Mountain Pass Mine receiving Department of Defense support to establish a full mine-to-magnet supply chain by 2027. Meanwhile, a massive lithium deposit discovered in Arkansas, potentially worth $1.5 trillion, could meet global battery demand multiple times over. Though local indigenous communities express environmental concerns, these moves reflect a broader push to reduce reliance on foreign supplies, particularly after China's export restrictions tightened global access to these critical minerals, reinforcing America's need for self-sufficiency to protect national security and economic interests. In the wake of conservative activist Charlie Kirk's tragic assassination at Utah Valley University, thousands worldwide have gathered in solemn vigils to honor his legacy as a fierce advocate for traditional values and American exceptionalism. From London to Sydney, supporters mourned the 31-year-old Turning Point USA founder, with gatherings in Orem, Utah, West Des Moines, Iowa, and Berlin, emphasizing his message of faith, family, and freedom. Erica Kirk, his widow, vowed to carry forward his mission, calling him a martyr whose influence will endure. These demonstrations reflect a unified resolve among conservatives to reject political violence and continue Kirk's work, even as tensions flare, evidenced by a brawl at a Boise vigil sparked by a detractor's provocation. The Senate recently defeated a resolution by Senator Ruben Gallego, Democrat from Arizona, to strip military funeral honors from Air Force veteran Ashley Babbitt, who was killed during the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. Gallego argued Babbitt's actions, attempting to breach the Speaker's lobby, disqualified her from honors, labeling her a traitor who betrayed her military oath. Republicans, led by Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville from Alabama, blocked the measure, defending Babbitt's 12-year service, including deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq, and the UAE, and arguing she was never convicted of a crime. The Air Force's decision to grant honors followed a $5 million wrongful death settlement with Babbitt's family, reversing a prior Biden-era denial. This debate highlights ongoing tensions over January 6's legacy, with conservatives emphasizing Babbitt's service and the lack of due process, while critics focus on her role in the riot. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen sharply criticized Democrat leaders, including Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, for their reluctance to endorse Zohran Mamdani, the neo-Marxist socialist New York City mayoral nominee, during a speech at the Polk County Steak Fry in Iowa on September 13th. Van Hollen argued that the party's hesitation reflects a broader problem of cautious, poll-driven politics that alienates voters tired of weak leadership. Especially, he said, as President Trump exploits these divisions to boost independent candidate Andrew Cuomo. He urged Democrats to rally behind Mamdani to counter Trump's influence in the race, warning that failure to do so risks further eroding the party's credibility on core issues like economic fairness. This critique highlights ongoing tensions within the Democrat Party between its Marxist progressive and establishment wings, with Van Hollen positioning himself as an opportunistic advocate for decisive action in a state in which he does not reside. Former President Joe Biden's planned presidential library in Delaware is hitting a financial wall, with major Democrat donors showing little enthusiasm for footing the bill. Reports indicate that even longtime supporters are either refusing to contribute or offering only token amounts, citing frustrations over Biden's inner circle, his decision to seek re-election despite health concerns, and a desire to preserve funds for future Democrat priorities. The fundraising goal of $200 million to $300 million seems increasingly out of reach, with some donors, like Florida lawyer John Morgan, dismissing the project as unlikely to materialize unless it's a bookmobile. Rufus Gifford, the library board chairman, remains optimistic, but the reluctance of key donors signals a broader disillusionment with Biden's presidential performance and legacy. Ted Dabrowski, former president of the conservative research group Wirepunts, has announced his candidacy for the 2026 Illinois Republican gubernatorial primary, aiming to challenge incumbent Democrat Governor J.B. Pritzker, who is seeking a third term. Dabrowski, a Wilmette resident with a background in international banking and policy analysis, criticized Pritzker's policies for making Illinois less prosperous, less educated, less safe, and a less desirable place to live, citing issues like stagnant job growth, rising taxes, and poor educational outcomes. Backed by State Senator Jason Plummer as campaign chairman, Dabrowski has raised over $1 million, positioning him as a fundraising leader among GOP contenders, including DuPage County Sheriff James Mendrick and Lake Forest businessman Joe Severino. His running mate, emergency room Dr. Carrie Mendoza, adds a healthcare perspective, having entered politics due to concerns over political interference in medicine. Dabrowski's campaign emphasizes conservative reform principles, aiming to offer Illinoisans a credible alternative amid widespread Pritzker fatigue. A State Department employee, Levita Furrer, aged 65, pleaded guilty to embezzling over $650,000 by writing 63 fraudulent checks to herself, citing pandemic-induced stress and a gambling addiction as her excuse, a justification that has drawn sharp criticism for its audacity. Furrer, who held signature authority over the department's bank account, misappropriated taxpayer funds over 2 years, falsifying records to conceal her scheme, and now faces up to 10 years in prison at her sentencing on September 18th. Critics argue this case highlights a broader issue of lax oversight in government agencies, allowing such betrayals of public trust to flourish unchecked during the chaotic pandemic era. The Justice Department's ongoing efforts to recover stolen funds underscore the challenges of reclaiming dissipated assets, leaving taxpayers to bear the burden of such flagrant misconduct. In a disturbing case of exploitation, federal prosecutors have indicted 8 leaders of the Georgia-based House of Prayer Christian Churches of America, including founder Roni Denny's, for orchestrating a decades-long, $22 million fraud scheme targeting U.S. military veterans and service members. The indictment claims the church, operating near major military bases, manipulated congregants into diverting VA education benefits to church-controlled accounts, misused funds for personal gain, and engaged in bank fraud through real estate schemes, all while exerting cult-like control over members. The FBI's recent raids and arrests near Augusta, Georgia follow a 2022 investigation, exposing a pattern of preying on the trust and service of America's military community for profit. This case raises serious questions about oversight of religious institutions and the protection of veterans' benefits from predatory schemes. New data reveals that 64% of violent robberies, physical attacks, and sexual assaults on Paris' public transport system in 2024 were committed by foreigners, with 43% of these crimes attributed to North Africans, despite their small population share. This alarming statistic, coupled with an 86% surge in sexual offenses since 2016, raises serious concerns about public safety and the impact of unchecked immigration policies. The findings, which align with similar trends in Germany, highlight a growing unease among women, with 56% expressing fear of using the Île-de-France rail network. Critics argue that these figures point to a failure of integration and call for stricter enforcement to restore order and protect citizens. Early projections from municipal elections in North Rhine-Westphalia reveal a significant surge in support for the far-right alternative for Germany, with the party tripling its vote share in some areas, reflecting growing frustration with establishment policies on immigration and economic stagnation. In industrial hubs like Gelsenkirchen, where unemployment and dissatisfaction with the Social Democrats' long tenure are high, the AfD's anti-immigration stance and promise of change resonated strongly, potentially securing mayoral victories. While Chancellor Friedrich Merz's Christian Democratic Union remains dominant in rural areas, the AfD's gains highlight a broader conservative shift, as voters demand stricter border controls and economic revitalization. This electoral test underscores challenges for Merz's coalition, as traditional center-left bases erode amid rising populist sentiment. Tens of thousands of Turks took to the streets in Ankara to protest a year-long legal onslaught against the Republican People's Party, with a critical court decision looming on September 15th that could annul the party's 2023 Congress and oust its leader, Özgür Özel, over alleged procedural irregularities. The CHP, led by jailed Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, who was arrested in March on corruption charges, claims the crackdown is a politically motivated attempt by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to suppress dissent and weaken a formidable electoral rival ahead of the 2028 general election. The protests, marked by chants for Erdogan's resignation and defiance against police barricades, reflect growing public frustration with what critics call an erosion of democratic norms under Erdogan's 22-year rule. This judicial overreach, coupled with the detention of over 500 CHP members, including 17 mayors, signals a troubling consolidation of power, raising concerns about Turkey's democratic future and its economic stability, as evidenced by a recent lira sell-off. A Russian drone penetrated Romanian airspace for approximately 50 minutes on September 13th, marking the second NATO airspace violation this week, following a similar incident in Poland. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky labeled the breach a deliberate expansion of Russia's war, urging stronger Western sanctions and collective defense measures. Romania scrambled F-16 jets to track the drone, which entered about 10 kilometers into its territory near Chileavec before vanishing from radar. The incident, coupled with Poland's earlier downing of Russian drones, has heightened NATO's alert status, with allies like Sweden and the Czech Republic reinforcing eastern flank defenses. Critics argue that continued NATO reliance on Russian energy undermines a unified response, as President Trump emphasized that sanctions should be contingent on NATO nations halting Russian oil purchases. Israel's military has escalated its campaign in Gaza City, destroying 3 high-rise residential towers, Mashtaha, Sausi and Al-Ruya, over recent days as part of a broader strategy to dismantle Hamas infrastructure ahead of a planned ground offensive. The Israel Defense Forces issued evacuation warnings to residents, claiming the buildings were used by Hamas for military purposes, a charge the group denies, asserting they housed displaced civilians. The strikes, which followed warnings giving residents as little as 20 minutes to flee, have fueled panic and displacement, with many Palestinians struggling to find safe refuge amid a worsening humanitarian crisis and famine conditions. Critics, including local health authorities, report significant civilian casualties, while Israel maintains its actions are necessary to neutralize Hamas threats and secure the release of hostages. In a move to fortify Switzerland's financial system, the government has proposed stringent regulations requiring UBS to hold an additional $27 billion in capital to mitigate risks following its 2023 acquisition of Credit Suisse. This push for enhanced stability, driven by concerns over the bank's size relative to the Swiss economy, aims to prevent another crisis, but has sparked debate over its impact on UBS global competitiveness. Critics argue the rules, which include fully capitalizing foreign units, could burden the bank and potentially drive it to consider relocating its headquarters, with London and the US as possible destinations. Supporters, however, see it as a necessary step to safeguard taxpayers and ensure economic stability, reflecting a cautious approach to managing one of the world's largest private banks. Jaguar's recent rebranding campaign, marked by a vibrant, car-less promotional video and a shift to an all-electric luxury lineup, has sparked significant backlash from traditionalists who view it as a departure from the brand's storied heritage. The campaign, featuring a new Jaguar logo and avant-garde imagery, aims to attract a younger, wealthier demographic but has alienated many loyal customers, with critics like Elon Musk questioning its focus. Managing director Rawdon Glover defends the strategy, arguing it's necessary to reposition Jaguar in a competitive market, with new electric vehicles priced above $130,000 set to launch in 2026. While some praise the move as innovative, others see it as a risky gamble that dismisses the brand's legacy, potentially jeopardizing its core audience for an uncertain future.
You're listening to Underground USA News.